Okay, today I'm totally jumping on a bandwagon and talking about Shane Dawson's recent sociopath slash Jake Paul documentary. And I'm just going to give my opinions as someone studying psychology and having a bit of experience in mental health, and whether or not I think that the documentary is doing more harm or more good. So I think the first bit is like, if you're talking about whether it's doing more harm or good, what's good and what would be harmful that this documentary could do? So it'll depend on what you want from this documentary. So I think it will be really good, possibly, it could be really good, talking about sociopathy, sociopaths, and how it's different, how it impacts people's lives, and just, I love documentaries on different humans. It's fun. So it could be a really good information-based documentary. However, it's about Jake Paul. So what would be the good outcome of all of this for Jake Paul? No, just for us, for the audience. Do we want Jake Paul to be humanized? Do we want to know him as a person and not just these short snippets, these productions of a ridiculous image? Because that is inevitable when you actually talk to anyone. You kind of understand them more as a person. So if you don't want that, that's going to be putting him in a good light, inevitably. Unless, of course, he just spouts racist nonsense, homophobic, just bad things without a single human moment. And I think that's not going to happen. So, intro done. I'd like to say that I've been loving Shane post deep frying Barbies and just eating a lot of food. His kind of showing friends and family, his kind of YouTube reality. I'm very happy that I've watched the two prior docu-series and I've really liked them. I kind of like when there's a little bit in between of like his normal life, but it seems like he did this very quickly after the three. I forgot the Star Jeffree Star one. I've watched all three of them then, so it was like a Graveyard Girl, Tanacon, Jeffree Star, and I think right after Jeffree Star he kind of started with this recent one. So I think it was really refreshing. It was an insight into YouTube, into YouTubers, and the people behind the YouTuber production, It's showing what life is like and giving them the chance to give explanations for and redeem themselves from what they've done, from the snippets that we've seen from past events, essentially. So I 100% understand those people that think that Jake Paul will come out of this with, a highlight with a halo of humanity. But I think also one thing that you have to look at is that it's all videotaped. Like, all of the wrong things he's done. Well, most of the wrong things he's done are going to be highlighted because some people wouldn't have ever seen them. I have to say, I honestly didn't know the difference between Jake Paul and his brother. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I thought that he did the Japanese suicide forest thing. Apparently it's the other one. So people will know all of the bad things they did, and then an explanation for them, hopefully. We'll see how it goes. However, where this deviates from the prior three documentaries is that he's not just talking about a YouTuber, YouTube life, etc., etc. He's trying to be a therapist, a psychologist. He's trying to diagnose, or not necessarily diagnose, but he's looking into something he's not informed about, he's not trained in. It's just, I don't think it's an appropriate leap for someone who has no training. So obviously he knows that he hasn't had this training. He doesn't know what a sociopath actually is, so he brought in a therapist called Katie Morton. Now, I have to say, I'm not sure about therapists and like the qualifications they need in the US versus the UK. So I'm not sure whether she has what qualifications she has and whether they would be appropriate in the UK. But she seems good enough. She has, been trained, she's worked in mental health. And whilst researching this, I found a video called "Is Katie Morton a Good Therapist?" Now, of course, I think we didn't see her being a therapist. We saw her read out the diagnosis, the traits that make up a sociopath. So we don't know if she's a good therapist at all, because what she was doing was not therapy. Also, my absolute pet peeve occurred in that video in the beginning. So Rewired Soul, the person who did the video, said he asked whether you need qualifications to be a good therapist or psychologist. Yes, you need qualifications to be a psychologist, because psychology is a science, and I'm afraid you need qualifications because you don't know what you're doing. You are not a psychologist unless you know the specifics of like what is ethical, what is appropriate, what statistics are appropriate to use in what situation. Like, you can do experiments, but if you're not a psychologist, if you're not trained, then you're just kind of manipulating people in a strange, creepy, scientific way. But anyways, back to Shane's docuseries. So basically, the episode was her being like, oh, so sociopaths, I almost said psychopaths, sociopaths do this. They don't feel empathy. And then Shane giving some example of just like, oh, is this a good example from a YouTuber? So that was fine. Like, if you're given knowledge and you're trying to apply it to the situations that you know about, it's the dramatification of that. I don't know. It's not kind of SJW. I don't think, to be offended by the making of a group of people into a horror facsimile, with masks, and at one point this woman eating a tiny man on her palm. Like, I don't think it was necessary to do it as much. Like, sure, you can get like a creepy vibe, be like, oh, I find it creepy that people aren't like me, but come on, not all sociopaths are going to be people who eat other people. They're obviously not all going to be cannibals. That's the word. And I mean, come on, Sherlock Holmes is kind of the classic literary example of a well-functioning sociopath. I mean, it's not appropriate to do it so frequently, It was just like literally between every segment, of which they didn't actually cover that much information. They basically just read out the definition of sociopathy, and it was kind of made much longer by these drawn out chats about not that much. I really would have liked more information. She gave the statistic that they think that sociopaths are much more prevalent than we'd think, at 20%. I love that statistic. I would really like to see the research behind it. I'd really like to see more research, more information. I want more info on sociopaths, treatment. They didn't talk at all about, like, they kind of said it can be caused by trauma, but I don't know about that. Like, how can it be caused by trauma? And specifically in a recent episode, the one about his enemies, they were saying about how to differentiate between psychopaths and sociopaths, and that you're born a psychopath. In fact, I watched a documentary in which they kind of did an experiment and looked at the fact that people who are psychopaths have a lessened connection between a part of their brain and the frontal lobe, so it's like a less strong connection, or something like that. Sorry, not off the top of my head, I'll link it down below. So they're born like that, perhaps. More research obviously needs to be done, but even more research needs to be done into what could cause a psychopath to just be environmentally caused. I'm sure that it's got some sort of genetic, you're more likely, you're more sensitive to it, or maybe not, I don't know, I don't have the information, and I would have preferred more actual content of from the therapist, I guess, but we will see her in upcoming episodes when she's going to pretend to be a producer, I guess. We'll see. Getting more into kind of the application of the information, I think they really should have spent a little bit of time and effort into, you know, the positives, not necessarily the positives of being a sociopath, but making it so that they don't feel like a creepy alien. So a well-raised sociopath might not understand emotions themselves, but from observation, from having loving parents that support them and whatnot, just like appropriate parenting, no trauma, though I guess apparently that's prerequisite. I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe if you get an adopted kid that was traumatized very young, maybe you could socialize them, not necessarily out of being a sociopath, but how to act normal, how to act appropriately in social situations. So they might not be able to empathize, but know that they shouldn't take advantage of people. I think that's one that Shane seemed really scared of pretending to be friends. Like, I don't know how emotionally important like empathy is in friendships, and just kind of like some helpful information in how to apply this information. Instead, I think it kind of furthers a bit of stigma against, mental health and specifically the sociopath diagnosis. Because I don't know, if everyone knows about sociopaths and kind of fear them, think they're, some sort of horror creature, then they won't admit that they're sociopaths, and kind of that could lead to more awkward situations down the line. So let me try to come up with an example. So if you have empathy issues, you might not know how to react if someone's crying. So their boyfriend broke up with them or whatever, and they could accidentally make inappropriate comments because they don't understand why they're crying. And this could lead to them like losing their friends, or just negative effects, where perhaps if they admitted their problems, their friends would be more empathetic, ironically, for their issues, and forgive them for their trespasses, kind of understand more why such events might occur. By the way, ironically, we were talking in a group about this documentary, and one of my friends from society were talking about how someone in her course, like almost immediately, like in the first conversation or like meeting between them, told her that she was a sociopath. So, well, I mean, I guess some people don't mind. I guess I kind of just wanted to talk about this because I have an opinion. I just really wanted to write a tiny essay script and think about what I mean. I felt like I didn't dislike the video. I didn't moan about it, make comments, but I did feel kind of disturbed by the depiction, or just felt, you know, I felt something and I was just like, I have an opinion, let's express it. Like, I like Shane's videos. I was gonna say I like him, I don't know him, so he seems likeable. I'm sorry that he's getting all of this backlash and if it's affecting his mental health, but I think it's good that he's kind of applying and trying to better the videos from what's being told to him. And just rewatching the series before I wrote the script, I do think that it's improved. I think a lot of the content until Enemies was kind of reactionary, a bit overreactionary, but it's gotten better as the series has gone on. And I do think he's kind of started in the Enemies episode in the humanizing of Jake Paul, with the British guy telling them that the videos were kind of faked, people knew what was happening, so they kind of gave consent for the horrible things that were done for them, and it's getting positive attention to Jake from the documentary. But I overall think that the documentary is doing more good than harm if it actually goes into a way that can kind of end up with sociopaths, people living with sociopaths, or, you know, if it can actually help people. If it shouldn't just be about Jake Paul. It shouldn't just be about the melodrama. I think it should, at its core, at its end at least, be about helping people. And I think Shane is going to kind of try to follow this path, and I'm just excited to see where this will go. Oh, P.S. I'm very sorry for how terrible this drawing in the background is. Kind of inspired by Shane Dawson's, the documentary's image of him being unzipped and sad, except this is a more bloody version, kind of ripping away the mask, but the mask is skin. Kind of like latex. But I'm trying to draw Shane. I didn't succeed. It does not look like a man, but I had fun. I did this quite quickly because I just felt enthusiastic about this topic and wanted to give my own little unnecessary opinion. So, thank you for coming in, guys.